Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Insufficient Friends. I'm Kevin. She's Nikki.
Hi.
And, Nick, we're gonna start off with sad news from this week.
Yeah.
First off, how are you doing? 'Cause,
Oh, I'm okay.
okay.
It's my feelings on this. So for everyone listening, Liam of One Direction and he was a solo artist too, passed away this week. Um, I was thinking a lot about how to word my feelings because I felt a lot of different things
Okay.
because, and I think there's room for each of these emotions. So I'm extremely sad that he passed away. First
Yeah.
off, just because he is a human being that passed away,
Yes.
and had a good heart and soul. Then I also felt like kind of um and bitter. I don't really know the right word. He had a lot of issues. He had a lot of personal things going on and that weren't necessarily great that he did. And then the other emotion I was feeling was just like the loss of, it's like when one of the Beatles died, they will never be the same again. And so the fact that we'll never have like a One Direction reunion, the
Yeah.
loss of that as well. So I had a lot of different like conflicting
Yeah, and there was,
emotions.
I work in television news, so
Hmm.
obviously I knew about this pretty soon after it happened. But,
Yeah.
um, it the going to the there won't ever be a reunion is even
Hmm.
another, like, I'm not a huge One Direction fan. There's some of their music's fine, but I'm not a huge fan. But
Yeah.
it was a little bit of a gut punch even for me, because there was, I heard a couple interviews with him talking about how
Mhm.
he was looking forward to being back with
I
the
know.
boys and doing
Yeah.
this again. And it's sad that
It's
he
very
won't be able
sad.
to do that, and that won't ever
And
happen.
part of
So,
me is like a lot of his issues, obviously the childhood fame, a lot of it stemmed from being a child star. Like we hear so many stories
hmm
of that. But I think it's almost like, and obviously I don't know him, this is all watching from afar and being a fan. A lot of the issues happened after the hiatus was going on and on and on, and he was trying to find his footing in his solo career, and he couldn't quite find his footing and the music industry on his own. And I think all that probably just escalated it.
yeah,
Um, and but it's as sad as it is, it's like the only positive thing you can take from it is it's a good reminder to always check on people, and
hmm
especially if someone's struggling with something, whether it's addiction or mental health issues or a combination of both. It's a good reminder to check on people
yeah.
for sure.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, keep your friends in mind. Not
Hmm.
not that even people who you may not be the closest with, that you're just or haven't talked to in a long time, just kind of keep
Yeah.
them in mind, and reach out to them every once in a while, make sure they're doing okay, because you don't ever know. Unfortunately, with
Yeah, you never
people,
know. Yeah.
we've seen it in the past. It's been I immediately think of, like, uh, Robin Williams and his
Hmm.
passing. Everybody was like, "Oh, he just seemed like such a happy person," and he
Yeah.
did always, but it just
Hmm.
you know it's not always how it actually is. So, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, there's lots of things going on internally. So I thought it was a good moment to also pause and reflect and mention that for
hmm
anyone who is struggling.
yes,
That there are lots of support, lots of resources, and no one is ever truly alone.
no,
Um, but
there's always somebody out
enough with
there.
this, enough with the sadness.
Yes, from sadness
I
to
felt sad all last night, so.
yes, from sadness we go to, sadness from 60 some years ago, 60, almost 61 years ago.
Yes.
Because we
Yeah.
don't have any shout outs because none of you decided to comment. Um, you know,
Yeah.
it is what it is at this point. Um, uh, but anyway, our topic for this week, and this is again, we've talked about this. If you guys don't give us like things to talk about, we're just going to talk about what we want to. And this week we
Yeah.
decided to talk about the assassination of JFK
Hmm.
and the conspiracy theories around the assassination of JFK because it's
Yep.
interesting to
Yeah.
us.
It's
Um,
fascinating.
it is
Yeah.
fascinating. So I I kind of looked more into the conspiracies, which I kind of knew some of
Hmm.
these. I learned some stuff about it, of course, going a little deeper
Yeah.
into it. But you kind of looked at the timeline of what actually
Yes.
um, happened.
Yeah, because and this was really interesting too, like not just reading through some conspiracy theories which I didn't know hardly anything about, but I also didn't hardly know any of the timeline
Mm-hmm.
or what happened because I feel like it's like a blip in the radar in like an American history class. Obviously, this is a massive event, but in the grand scheme of things, we didn't really do a deep dive. So it was really interesting to do a deep dive into this, but yeah, so really the prelude to everything was um I have some like background in Lee Harvey Oswald too. And so in 1956, and to give it a time frame reference, the assassination was in 1963. Um, so in 1956, though, in October, so Lee Harvey Oswald, he dropped out of high school, joined the U.S. Marine Corps, which I did not know that he was in the Marine Corps, and trained as a sharpshooter. And then pretty soon after that, he defected to the Soviet Union and worked at an electronics factory in Minsk, which was also kind of confusing to me.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so he did that. Um, that was 1959. In 1960 is when Kennedy wins the election.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the election year. So he served 3 years pretty much, or a little under 3 years total.
Yep.
1962, Oswald returned to the United States, and he has a wife and a kid, and they lived in Texas. They had a house, but they also rented a different PO box. And it was under his real name because he had a couple different things like under different aliases. And so there's lots of timeline as far as like Texas history, but the gist of it is in 1963, there was a Democratic governor elected. He took the oath. He was the one that started planning the president's trip to Texas because he was going to like host it because he was the new Democratic governor. March 13th of 1963, Klein Sporting Goods of Chicago gets a mail order, $21.45 for an item that is a 1891 Italian Carcano model 1938 rifle with a scope. So that's March of that year. They received that. The name on the order was A. Hedel, which is one of the aliases
Mm-hmm.
that
Okay.
Oswald used. So in March of that year, he ordered a rifle with a scope under an alias.
By the way,
But the,
by
oh
the way,
yeah, go ahead.
$21 for a rifle
I know. Yeah.
is crazy to think about.
Yeah. And for a World War II 1891 thing, like or model, but it was a 1938 rifle, so that's already I don't know, it seems like that's like almost like a collector type thing.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't
I
know
don't know.
anything about it,
That
but
that just that's just crazy. Like $20.
yeah.
I mean, you can't get a hamburger now for $20. It seems like so $20 to buy a rifle is kind of crazy. Now I know a
Yeah,
hamburger back in the '60s would have been like what, probably 30 cents or
$1.
something. But anyway,
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah. Um, so this sporting goods store got that order under an alias, but the delivery address was their Oswald's Dallas PO box.
Okay.
That was under his name. Um, and they compared serial numbers and things, and those all matched. So pretty soon after that, after they received that gun, Marina, so Oswald's wife, sends a letter to the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., asking to be granted entrance visa to the USSR. Um, and then also pretty soon after that, Oswald was given notice of his current job. He was going to be terminated. And then he eventually got another job at a book place, but I'll get to that in a little bit. So, in April of that year, 1963, and these are the things I had no idea on. Oswald was suspected for other shootings as well. So, April of 1963, retired General Edwin Walker, who was a very strong right-wing anti-communist advocate, Oswald fired at him but missed. But the case was unsolved until after his death, and Marina actually came forward and said it was him.
Hmm.
So it's odd that he was also suspected in other things as well. But um,
Hmm.
so he had lots of personal things leading up. It wasn't just like he got shipped a gun, the president was coming in assassination. It was like there was a lot of things that happened in between. He applied for a passport in Louisiana in June of that year and said he wants to leave the country for 3 months to a year and is issued the passport. There's so many weird things, and he also tried to get other yeah, he went to Mexico City,
Hmm.
tried to visit the Cuban consulate in order to get a visa to Cuba and was denied. So lots of like communists, I believe a lot of these countries he was wanting to be in were communist.
Yeah.
But he was denied to both Cuba and the Soviet embassy.
Hmm.
So just interesting political lead up on his side. And so he bought a bus ticket on September 30th under an alias, H.O. Lee, to Mexico City, or from Mexico City to Texas, Laredo, Texas. And he arrives in Dallas on October 3rd and spends the night at the YMCA. October 4th, Governor Connolly, the new governor of Texas, meets President Kennedy at the White House and they start, I think, planning, the trip and
Mm-hmm.
everything. Um, there's so many different weird parts of this time. The, this is so extensive. I mean, these are literally college classes of,
Yeah.
the whole
Oh,
story of this thing.
yeah. It's
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 just
it's one of those
crazy
that's
wild.
just people have spent their entire lives just investigating this one thing. Um,
Yeah.
I saw somewhere that there's where did it say? There's like several. Where did it say here? Hold on, I found it a second ago. Um, Several thousand books just on one to two
Yeah.
thousand books on on just the conspiracies on the killings. Like
Yeah,
it's
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 truly
it's
crazy.
crazy how much
Yeah.
this is this
Yeah.
gripped the nation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I'm gonna fast forward quite a bit, but I wanted to just go through the weird political lead ups of he was trying to get visas and passport. He did get his passport, but was denied his visas. There was just a lot of weird things going on there with both him and Marina, his wife. So fast forward, he works at a school book depository in Dallas now because he was fired from his other job earlier that year. So when we fast forward to past quite a bit, but it's so much that I can't go through it on here. So if we fast forward to November 22nd,
Mm-hmm.
Friday, 1963. So 7:23 a.m., Oswald goes to work at the school book depository. Um, and he was carrying a long paper wrapped package. And another young worker there asked him what it was, and he said, just some curtains. That was his reply.
Which is a random thing to be carrying through work, but whatever.
Yeah, like why? Why are you taking that to work? Did they ask you to renovate? Like what? 8:45 a.m. President Kennedy was speaking at a breakfast in a different place.
Mm-hmm.
But largely the attendees were conservative Republicans. After that breakfast, he had a scheduled speech in a Hotel Texas Grand Ballroom. Um, and the Secret Service agent in charge of the trip, in charge of the whole trip, it sounds like, said that the presidential limousine should not be equipped with its bubble top if the weather is clear, and the weather was clear.
Mm-hmm.
So there was that part of it with the Secret Service figuring out the plan for the day based on the clear weather. Um, there was lots of publicity around this, so everyone knew he was going to be there, of course.
Mm-hmm.
There was a bunch of receptions, a bunch of welcome Mr. Kennedy receptions and things on the news. And Kennedy is reported as telling his wife, we're heading into nut country today. Because a lot of the speaking he was doing was very conservative Republican attendees. So that brings us to 10:40 a.m. His motorcade departs Hotel Texas for Carswell Air Force Base. Um, and then the Air Force One arrives at Love Field in Dallas at 11:38 a.m. 11:44, they disembark. Air Force One are greeted by the Johnsons, and the motorcade cars had been lined up and they were ready to go. So they depart Love Field about 15 minutes after they arrive. After the president and his wife shake hands with some supporters and different things. So the motorcade took a left turn from the south end of Love Field. And maybe I'll post like a picture of the map.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw a really good
Yeah.
version of this like annotated map. So they leave Love Field. It's a 10-mile trip through downtown Dallas. They took a left turn from the south end of Love Field to West Mockingbird Lane to continue through central Dallas and progress down Main Street. 12:29 p.m., they turned right into Houston Street, entering Dealey Plaza. And they approached the Texas School Book Depository where Oswald worked. 12:30 p.m., so 1 minute later, the motorcade made a sharp 135-degree left turn onto Elm Street, a downward sloping road. The giant Hertz rent-a-car clock on the top of the depository building was seen to change from 12:29 to 12:30.
Mm-hmm.
So here's where we get to it happening. Witnesses say that the first shot was fired after the president started waving with his right hand to the crowd. Onlookers recalled hearing 3 shots. The Zapruder, I don't know if I'm saying
Zapruder.
that name
Yep.
right.
Zapruder film.
Zapruder
Mm-hmm.
shows the president reemerging after being temporarily hidden from view by a freeway sign.
Mm-hmm.
And his mouth was already open and an anguished expression by like a certain frame of the film. And that's when he was struck with the bullet. So it struck him in the back and exited his throat,
Mm-hmm.
which is just horrific to like be saying this out loud. He then raises his fist in front of his face and throat as he turns to the left towards his wife.
Mm-hmm.
Connolly is also hit. Now, the Secret Service agent testified, Agent Clint Hill said he heard 1 shot and then jumped off the running board. And there's like different frame marks of this video,
Mm-hmm.
and basically the president's head exploded, which is, I hate that I am saying these words out loud right now,
Yep.
at frame 313 in
Mm-hmm.
this video.
Yep.
So that's the timeline, and then the limousine began speeding up. Miss Kennedy was screaming, which I can't even talk about her reaction to it. It's just so horrible. And so she was screaming. They had accelerated the limo. Miss Kennedy was heard saying like I have his brains in my hand, and they went to Parkland Hospital
Mm-hmm.
right after this. It was approximately 4 miles away, which I'm sure felt like forever
Oh, I'm sure.
of a drive.
Yeah,
four
I'm sure.
miles. Anyway, so that's the actual thing.
And he,
12:33, Oswald was, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say 12:33 is when Oswald was reportedly leaving his work through the front door. And he was confronted
Mm-hmm.
by a patrolman and a superintendent, but they let him pass because they had identified him as an employee, not an onlooker.
Yeah,
Um, which there was so much that he did after this that I had no idea about. So President Kennedy went to the hospital, was declared deceased already, was given his last rites because he was Catholic, and all that happened. And then um Oswald, 1:04 p.m., housekeeper Erlene Roberts said Oswald departed 3 or 4 minutes after arriving at the rooming house where he was staying, and then said she last saw him standing at a bus stop. And then he, 10 minutes later, shot and killed Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit.
mm-hmm.
Crazy. 13 people witnessed that, apparently, and witnessed him fleeing the scene. And then 5 identified him in police lineups after that. Um, gosh, this is just so crazy how quick it all happened. So
Yeah,
1:26 p.m., Lyndon Johnson departs the hospital. And then it was so crazy how quick he was declared president after that. Where did it go? 2:38 p.m. Within 3 hours, Johnson was sworn in as president.
mm-hmm.
Just so crazy in that day and time where all of this was announced on TV.
Yeah,
After it happened, it's not like we have social media where you see it instantly, but still within 3 hours, he was declared president and the whole country knew, basically.
yeah,
So I skipped a lot, and I feel like I still talked forever on this, but I did skip a lot.
yeah.
But
I mean,
yeah,
there's a lot to it. Um,
yeah, so much to it.
and I mean, obviously, the main part is the Kennedys driving through Dealey Plaza and
Yeah.
JFK. The
Mhm.
20 some odd seconds that the Zapruder film is basically the main gist of
Yeah.
what happens. Have you ever seen the Zapruder film?
No, I hate watching things where people die.
I get that. It's not.
I don't know that I would watch
It's
it.
not. I've seen it. I don't.
Hmm.
I'd seen it before. I mean, I saw it again
Have
today
you?
watching some of this stuff, but I had seen it
Yeah.
before, years ago.
Yeah.
And it's you don't, like you said in it, you see them kind of go behind a freeway sign, and then he just
Hmm.
kind of emerges, and he just kind of like looks, he doesn't really look that crazy. You can see him kind of moving around and
Hmm.
kind of leaning over, and then you actually see him like real, like the one that
Mm.
actually killed him, and it was, yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of graphic. Um,
Ugh.
so
Yeah, I don't think I can watch it.
it's definitely
Yeah.
not something that most people should probably
I
watch
don't
for
think
the
I can
faint of
watch
heart.
it because of I've heard how Jackie Kennedy reacts in it,
Yeah,
and
she like
I
almost
can't
climbs
I
out of
can't
the
see
back of the
that.
car. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't see it.
Um.
That would hurt me too much. Yeah.
So yeah. November 22nd, 1963. Which means we're almost we're coming up on the anniversary actually of
Anniversary
it.
of
It's
it.
just next
Yeah.
month. Um.
Hmm.
There are so many conspiracy theories on this. Um.
Yeah.
It. I mean, there's there's so many different conspiracy theories because the investigations that happened after it were so just incomplete, and just kind of
Hmm.
seemed to leave out so much information and so many reports. um, there are different um, ideas that Oswald was anywhere from a co-conspirator to not involved at all in the
Yeah.
attack or in the assassination. Um, the FBI, the CIA, the military, the mafia, Castro, the KGB are all named in different
Yeah.
conspiracy theories. So is was then Vice President Johnson, which is the one that my grandma
Hmm.
thinks it is. My grandma has told me several times that she thinks that Johnson
Really?
had Kennedy assassinated, because she
Yeah.
thinks that he wanted to be president that bad, and he
Wow.
just had Kennedy assassinated.
Hmm.
It is, and there's so much, like I said, evidence that goes against what the original Warren investigation came to the conclusion of, which was that there was one shooter
Yeah.
and one bullet, and that was it. And it's called the magic bullet theory because the way that, if you go by some of the accounts of how it would have had to move, it had to like go down through Kennedy and then make a turn and come back up and go through the governor, which is really
Yeah.
weird. There's different like things you can find online of like the directions that it talks about how it would go.
Yeah.
Um, it caused 7 different injuries, which is, like that's not something that you would believe happen. Um,
With one bullet. Yeah.
and then you've also like the other thing that people still to this day, why people think it's a conspiracy theory, and the most one that I heard out of all these is that
Hmm.
the FBI, the CIA, or the U.S. government in general, somebody was involved, whether or not
Hmm.
whether or not the people that were investigating tried to cover it up or just were complicit or naive or
Hmm.
just didn't want to, you know, cause a bigger issue is
Hmm.
is what nobody knows. There's still more than 4,000 documents that are either still classified or partly classified.
Yeah.
But that's like 1% of all the documents that were done that were
Mhm.
investigated in this. So it's not a lot. It's a very small amount, but the fact that there is
Mhm.
still 60 years later so many classified documents is kind of a odd thing for something that was this big of a ordeal
Yeah.
and nobody's around for anymore. Um, I heard different interviews of people talking about. I heard an actual interview with uh, Zapruder, the guy who did the film that is so
Hmm.
famous, and he was on the grassy knoll, which is how he got
Mm.
where he got the video from. And
Yeah.
the one of the theories is that another person would have had to be on the grassy knoll to shoot Kennedy to deliver
Hmm.
the deadly shot. But if you hear Zapruder talk about it, he doesn't believe that's possible. He did say that there was more than one shot, but he
Hmm.
said they came from the direction of the schoolbook depository where Oswald was. He didn't hear
Hmm.
anything come from the other side, which is, I mean,
He would have heard it
he
because
would
he
have
would have
only
been
been like
close
30 feet
by.
away, I think is what it said. 30 to
Yeah.
35 feet
Which you
away.
definitely would have heard a
You
gunshot
you
from
would
30
have
feet away.
thinking you
Yeah.
would have heard a gunshot from that area. Um
Yeah.
so that's kind of, and this is, Zapruder died in the 70s, so in the early
Hmm.
70s, before his video even became public, because the first time it was ever shown was on Geraldo in 75, I believe. So it was
Oh.
more than a decade after this happened before it was shown to the
Hmm.
public. um
Interesting. I did not know that. I didn't know he passed away before it. Yeah. Interesting.
yeah, and there's actually evidence that a police officer confronted a man at the grassy knoll who showed him um, a Secret Service badge, which
Hmm.
is a weird,
Hmm.
like, just a weird thing that happened in that area. Like, it's just, there's
Yeah.
so many oddities with
Yeah.
the
One of the
stories.
ones that I've seen, because I've seen and heard very little about this,
Mm
which is really interesting because for everything that I love about history, and I'm so interested in history, I'm surprised I haven't read more in the past or heard more about this in the past. But um, one of the conspiracies I see as I'm like scrolling through things is about that it was possibly a mob hit. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the only one that really heard because of, well, and maybe it's this too. I do like the reading mob history, and the Kennedys were no stranger to organized crime. So maybe that's why I've seen that one, but that was interesting as well. And then reading about him and his brother, and yeah.
Yeah. One of the other ones is that I heard was that there was a conflict between the CIA and Kennedy because the CIA
Mm,
reportedly wanted the war in Vietnam to continue to grow, to continue to escalate,
mm-hmm.
because they were making money and doing a bunch of,
Yeah,
we've obviously seen investigations over the past years that the CIA hasn't always been the best, and
yeah.
the best organization, and the it is what it is. It's unfortunate, but
Hmm.
and Kennedy didn't want that. He wanted the war to end. He wanted to end it in his next term.
Yes.
And he was just getting, like, this was the start of his kind of re-election campaign starting to kind of get underway for the next
Hmm.
year. But there's
And that
so
was going to be one of the things I was going to talk about in a minute too. When we talk about like if history would have changed, that was the first one that people always say is about the Vietnam War.
yeah, I mean, obviously he wanted to end it, and with how
Hmm.
popular he was, I'm sure he would have been elected. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
that there was a chance that he wouldn't have been elected. It would have been a
Yeah, from the limited reading that I did, it seems like unless there are some historians that think he definitely would have been reelected unless a lot of his shady past came out, like the um either the affairs, the mob ties,
yeah,
anything that was in the closet, unless that came out, he would have been
which
reelected.
is always possible. Like, it's
Yeah.
impossible to know what would have happened because obviously
Mhm.
what happened is what it was. Um,
Yeah.
but the other thing about this that a lot of people, or that I've found out, which I didn't think about this or didn't realize this, is there was another person filmed. Like, this was in the 60s. Not a lot of people had cameras or video
Hmm.
cameras. So the Zapruder film is the one that was used by the Warren Commission and the one that was prominent and is still talked about
Okay.
most today. There is another one that was filmed by Orville Nix. Now, it only shows a few seconds, but it's from the
Mhm.
opposite direction. It looks at the grassy knoll.
Oh, okay.
And the problem is, though, is it was sold. Nick sold it to the United
Hmm.
Press something after
Mm.
shortly after the assassination. And
Hmm.
when they returned it, it was a copy. So nobody knows where the original
Oh,
file is.
yeah.
His family's well, last year his family sued to get the original file from the government, sued the National Archives, because they argue that
Mm.
they're trying to hide it, basically. But
Yeah.
there's there's all these accounts too, and you see it in some of the videos of, because Zapruder didn't continue filming into this part, but you see people running towards the grassy knoll, like not running away, running towards the grassy knoll, almost like they're chasing
Oh.
somebody. And that's what a lot of people will have I've heard
Hmm.
talk about, is that there's so much belief that there was somebody else in that
Hmm.
area.
Hmm.
It's kind of up. It's got the perfect vantage point for what happened.
Hmm.
And it's just a I don't know. And then you've also got the
Yeah.
whole fact that 2 days after he's arrested, after this assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald is killed by a nightclub owner in Dallas
Yeah.
while he's being transferred to court, which is just another whole addition to what the F happened. Why
I know.
is.
It's odd.
Like
All
was
around. Like this whole thing is odd.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, like I said, there's been thousands of books written on the assassination that go into much more
Yeah.
depth than we're ever going to get into.
Yeah.
But it it's just a it's such. I mean, I recommend looking at it and looking it up. You
Hmm.
know, find there's so many documentaries that you can find on YouTube. I mean, you can just pull up, internet articles about it because there's so many people that have done so much research on it. Um,
Hmm.
and it's just, it is a crazy story.
It
And it's
is.
also
Yeah.
amazing that we don't have any more information than what we do today. There's still so much unknown. And a lot of
Hmm.
people don't think we'll ever know.
Yeah. It's with a lot of things like this, and we've talked about this before. History, the accounts of history, because so much of it is verbal and passed down. Of course, with this one, it's more modern history, so there are documents, but the government's going to conceal them. But there's just so many different accounts, things get twisted.
Hmm.
Also, just in crime and law in general, eyewitness accounts are so horrible.
Oh,
They
yeah.
are always
Yep.
conflicting. No one, that's why as much as possible nowadays they try to separate people, get, stories when they're not apart because then you get the group thinking.
Yeah.
It's just like you can't rely on
No.
eyewitnesses hardly ever.
Eyewitnesses
So,
eyewitnesses are actually terrible. They're terrible
yeah.
for investigations because most people don't know what they saw
Yeah.
ever.
Because
And
your brain doesn't process every single thing it
yeah,
sees
so it
until
fills in
something
the
happens
gaps.
and then it,
Yeah.
exactly,
And
exactly.
it just
Yeah.
fills in the
It's
gaps with what
crazy.
it thinks is supposed to be there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's and it's based on what your brain knows. It's based on
Mm-hmm.
your life and everything else and what it believes is supposed to be there. So there's just yeah, it's just filling in the gaps, which is I
Yeah.
mean, which is why nobody can really say what happened, but
Mm-hmm.
the video and this kind of stuff helps. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the I also heard an interview with a someone who did an audio investigation on the file, the Zapruder film,
Mm-hmm.
and he said that there was more shots heard than what the investigations reported or what the FBI reported
Mm.
too. So,
Yeah.
like, you could hear more shots on it. Now, again, you know, it's it's hard to know what is um accurate with a film like that because it's
Yeah.
it's so old, it's so grainy.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like nowadays when you know every single one of those thousands of people would have their phone out taking a picture or a video of Kennedy
Yeah.
as he drove by.
And every single thousands of people that have that phone recording on a smartphone, it has like a timestamp. You can tell if it's been altered,
Yeah.
so that also,
Yeah, and this is
changes it
not
too.
and that's not how this kind of stuff was obviously. So
Hmm.
it is um yeah, 2 hours and 8 minutes after Kennedy was assassinated, Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in. That's just crazy.
Yeah, that's
That
crazy.
even seems that just seems fast. Like
Yeah.
even
And I mean, I
with
get it
what happened.
because if the country is without a president, it's vulnerable. And so you need to have that's the reason why we have a vice president is for
Yeah.
continuity and leadership. So I get it, but it's still just wild to think about.
Yeah. Well, this
Yeah.
even says that it like this even describes it as a uh hastily done thing, like very
Hmm.
very like, oh, we need to get this
Yeah.
done, which I get. Um
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
yeah, it's
It
just
is
a
crazy because everyone knows that the reason the vice president is there is to become the president in case of emergency, but like 2 hours, jeez.
yeah.
But yeah,
Um
and
go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say it. The thing that always blows my mind too is because no matter what we talk about, whether it's, JFK or what, I always immediately go to how would history have been different. My ultimate go-to is like Mary Queen of Scots. Like if she had lived and been queen,
Mm-hmm.
that would have changed the course of European history. Elizabeth the First wouldn't have, been the same. Like I just go down these rabbit holes of thinking up these imaginary scenarios in my head.
It's yeah, it's interesting.
Mhm.
What I didn't look too much in this, but you said you did look at
Mhm.
like some of the things that would have
Yeah.
changed, or what would have been
Yeah.
different.
And so the first one is obviously the next election. The election was the next year.
Mm-hmm.
And if he would have lived, so most people say he probably would have been reelected unless um his personal and political secrets were revealed. So the two biggest ones were the affairs and the mob ties.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's been several novels, or not novels, books written about like the what if of the political and personal side of things, and
Mm-hmm.
and how realistically these things probably would have come out. Now, whether they came out before the election and he just wasn't reelected, or they came out after and then he would have been impeached, maybe that's a different, argument.
Yeah.
But I thought that was interesting. Um, and the Vietnam is the second biggest one. So just like you said earlier, he very much wanted to pull out of Vietnam. And there are some historians that say he wanted to, but they don't think he actually would have or would have been able to. And then there are some that said he wanted to and he would have.
Yeah.
So, like anything, there's differing opinions there. But then civil rights, the Cold War, and the space program are the last three like biggest things that I saw when reading. So civil rights, um, so Lyndon B. Johnson, of course, gets credit for a lot of this. And there's been like novels and things. I think even Stephen King wrote one about, if a time traveler foiled the plot to
Mm-hmm.
assassinate, and
Yeah.
then
I
when
have
he
that
goes
one.
back in time.
Yeah.
Oh, is that the one that you have?
Yeah. I have.
Yeah.
I have a lot of Stephen
And so
King
when he
books,
goes,
so I have
yeah.
most Stephen
And
King
when the
books.
time traveler goes like back to the future, he discovers that like the Civil Rights Act would have never passed, but obviously that's fiction.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just interesting to think about, like, of course, all the things that Johnson gets credit for that Kennedy probably would have done. And who knows if he would have done them differently or better. But um the Cold War, he was really getting close to Nikita Khrushchev, and they were becoming really close and wanted to reduce the nuclear weapons arsenal in the
Mm-hmm.
world. So that could have, opened up a bunch of different doors. And then the last thing was the space program, and just how that would have been different, and the different missions, and what his passions were there versus Nixon, who approved the Mars mission. So just the like it the consensus seems to be that nothing probably would have changed in like the grand scheme of things, but a
Yeah.
lot of things maybe would have been done differently, of course,
Yeah.
or to a grander scale or lesser scale. So it's interesting. It's really interesting to read
Yeah.
through and think how crazy things are.
Well, you talk about like the space program, and Kennedy was one of the ones like who pushed the space program forward to its limits,
Hmm.
because he gave the famous speech, about going to the moon within a
Yeah.
decade, and we did make it to the moon within a decade, and it was very close, but the United States figured out a way to put people on the moon. um
Yeah.
and it's so I do think some things would have changed, but I don't know, like you said,
The
I don't know how much overall things
yeah.
would have changed. It's kind of hard to.
It
I've
is hard. And there were some that said like because of his budding, not friendship, but relationship with Khrushchev, some people were like, "Oh, we could have had a joint space program." And I was like, I don't think that would have ever happened,
Yeah,
but you never know.
I I've always had like a little bit of a hard time with hypotheticals and stuff like that because of this, because it's like
Hmm.
I don't really know how to think about something that isn't
Hmm.
ever happened or isn't ever
Yeah,
gonna
because
happen.
hypothetically, literally anything in the
Anything could
world could
happen.
happen.
Like anything
A
could
comet
happen.
could hit us right now, and we wouldn't even have to think about
Yeah. Um so interestingly too, you know, we talked about um the limousine being a convertible. That's
it.
obviously not a
Hmm.
thing anymore.
Yeah.
Which is, now we have this thing called the Beast, which there's two of, and you never know which
Hmm.
one the president's in, and it's like it's a monstrosity. Have you ever seen, like, I'm sure you've seen videos or pictures of it, haven't you?
Yeah. Hmm.
So, do you know any of the details about it?
No, no, I've just seen pictures.
So, it weighs about 10 tons.
Jeez.
It is hermetically sealed, so it can't get chemical attacks.
Uh-huh.
It's basically like James Bond's car. So it's got like oil slicks
Goodness.
and like run flat tires and night vision and like smoke screens so it can get away in any case.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to look like a Cadillac, but it's not really a Cadillac. Like it's
Mm.
so um over the top. But the most fun thing about it is that whenever they retire one,
Hmm.
there's one in there's not the Beast, obviously it's an old version of one of the cars, but there's one in the Clinton Museum in uh the Clinton Library in Little Rock
Hmm.
because I saw it there. um
Hmm.
and but when they get rid of these, the Secret Service uses guns and explosives to destroy it. First, they kind of do like a demonstration to show what it can actually stand up to, and then they
Hmm.
completely shred it to pieces to make sure that none of the technology can be figured out,
Wow.
which is just crazy. Um,
Hmm.
but it's and that's kind of where we've gotten to with that. Kind of starts with the fact that Kennedy was assassinated on a trip like this. Like it's not
Yeah.
something that can it's not something that you want to happen or that can happen. It's
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but
It's wild.
yeah, I don't know. The Kennedy, the whole thing with Kennedy is just a crazy. Um, it's a crazy ordeal with a lot of conspiracy theories. Have you ever been
Hmm.
to Dealey Plaza? Have you ever been to Dallas, to that area?
I've been to Dallas, but only for a marching band
So I'm
competition.
guessing no,
No.
unless you marched down that street.
Yeah.
Um,
No, we were in the, no, was it Dallas? No, it was San Antonio. So I've been to Dallas, but no. Anyways, no, I've never been there.
okay.
Not to Dealey Plaza.
Um, I mean, it's a boring little area. There's nothing there
Yeah.
really. Like there's a couple museums around the corners, like the school book depository has a museum in it and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
I've been there and stood on the grassy knoll, and it's a weird place to be, knowing what happened there,
Yeah.
just like anything. But
Hmm.
um, they have uh, marks on the pavement of where the car was when he was shot, which is also weird. So like you can see
Yeah.
the exact location of where the car was when the bullets hit him. But anyway,
Hmm.
um, I
Crazy.
think after us rambling for so long, it's time for
Yeah.
facts.
Yeah.
Anyway, um, so Nick, what is your fact for this week?
Hmm. Okay. I'm going happy. And it has to do with One Direction because One Direction is my happy place.
Okay.
So, I thought this was, and I had known this before, but I had always thought this was fascinating. So, One Direction's first full length album, Up All Night, their debut album, they became the first UK based musical group to debut at number one on the US Billboard 200 album chart. So, like, even the Beatles didn't do this.
Yeah.
And so I've always thought like that is so cool being, a teenager that loved them and grew up with them and everyone's like, "Oh, One Direction sucks." I'm like, "Actually, they debuted." I remember saying this to people. Actually, they debuted at number one.
Yeah. I
So I
mean,
always thought that fact was interesting.
they are a very they are a very iconic group, and
Hmm.
they broke several of the Beatles records. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so they're very
Yeah,
talented.
no, I'm
Like,
not saying they're better than the Beatles,
no,
but yes, they did
but
break
yeah,
several of their records. But they always get the same reaction as like when you say I like Taylor Swift, when you say I like One Direction, it's always the same freaking reaction of people like just they're not good artists. Why do you like them? It's
yeah. I mean,
you know,
yeah.
and that always annoyed me
Well, you know what?
growing up.
Sometimes people just suck, which is
Yeah,
unfortunate. But
true.
so I have a small list of Kennedy facts, which I thought were interesting,
Oh, okay.
and
Yeah.
it's a list of first things he
Oh.
had done. So he was the first president. He was the 35th president of the United States. He was the first president to be born in the 20th century. So the first president to be born in the 1900s.
Mm. Okay.
He was the first Roman Catholic president.
I knew that. Yes.
He was the first president to have been a Boy Scout, which is
I did
interesting.
not know that.
I did not know that either. Um, and he was also the only president to receive a Purple Heart. I don't
Oh,
know if that's
interesting.
still true or not.
Hmm.
Um, I,
Yeah,
yeah, I don't know.
interesting. I
I,
knew he was Catholic because obviously I grew up Catholic and everyone's like, Kennedy was Catholic. And then, but I did not know he was a Boy Scout. So my uncle that is a Catholic Boy Scout will love this.
yeah, I didn't know he was a Boy Scout either. That's interesting.
Hmm.
Don't, I never did Boy Scouts, or any of that. I'm not that
Yeah.
outdoorsy, so,
Yeah. I
um,
did Girl Scouts, but like I think I only went to like one of the camps. I don't remember going to more than one at least because I'm also not an outdoorsy person.
yeah,
But I sold the heck out of those cookies. I
yeah,
walked around the
I,
neighborhood and
I can
sold
get that.
those and
I can totally get behind the Girl Scout cookies because they're
oh,
freaking
they're so
awesome.
good. I tried to find, I'm like, I don't know where to buy those anymore because no one walks around houses anymore. A for safety, B for COVID, but
Um,
um
Walmart.
I don't know where to get them.
Go to outside the grocery
Oh,
stores. They're usually there in the spring, or you can actually
oh.
go online and buy them online now.
Ooh,
You can
I
buy
will
it's
do
like
that.
Girl Scout like it's girlscoutcookies.org or something like that. It's something there's like a website that you can go to with the Girl Scouts and find them. I think almost year round. Um,
Ooh, how to buy cookies. Girl Scouts of the USA. Find cookies near you. Ooh. Okay, I'm gonna have to look at this. It's literally called Cookie Finder, is this tool.
okay, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Okay.
I love
Well,
it.
while Nick's having fun looking up cookies,
Anyways,
I think that's it for this week. Um,
yeah,
don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and I guess we'll talk to you guys next week.
bye.